Hey miners, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. In today's video, Anthony Power and I are joined by Aydin Kilic, the president and CEO of HIVE Digital Technologies, along with the executive chairman and co-founder Frank Holmes. We're going to be talking all things HPC, AI, self-mining, and of course 2025 expansion and outlook. We've got so much to talk about. Before we get into it, take a second, hit the like button, you guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comments section below if you're currently holding shares of HIVE, how you think they stack up to the other miners we cover on the channel, and your outlook for this company entering 2025. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, so that's right. Today's video, we've got Frank Holmes, the co-founder and executive chairman, along with Aydin Kilic, the CEO of HIVE Digital Technologies. A lot to go through in today's podcast, so we'll get right into it. But before we start, Happy New Year. Thanks for being back on the channel.
Good to be with you.
Great. Hey, so this is the question we've been kicking off most of the interviews so far in January with. 2024 was obviously a transformational year for Bitcoin price, adoption, policy, also for the Bitcoin mining stocks. So we wanted to go back over the last 12 months, if you could highlight any of the key or notable milestones for the audience.
Go ahead, Big A.
Well, I think we rounded the year out with 2,805 Bitcoin on the balance sheet. You know, Bitcoin is essentially at $100,000. That's $280 million of Bitcoin mined with green energy, unencumbered on the balance sheet. So for every dollar of HIVE stock you buy, you're getting over 50 cents of Bitcoin. And I think that we're a phenomenal value proposition from that alone. But then when you look at the growth that we've announced, our exciting foray into Paraguay, Frank and I were down there in December with our team. Our site is well underway. The civil's completed, and we're going to be laying down about 8.5 exahash of Bitmain S21 plus hydros, 15 joules per terahash. And by the way, we did field diligence. We saw them in the wild, and they work great. So that's going to get us to our summer target of the 15 exahash. So we've been very much timing the growth. So we scale with intention. So we're accretive and we get good cash flow return on invested capital, as you know, has been our MO since day one. And so we're really excited about the Paraguay opportunity. So I think that's big. And then, of course, I know you guys are big Bitcoiners, but the HPC, we just announced a $30 million investment into NVIDIA H100s and H200s. The H100 cluster is actually installed, and we are planning to deploy that with a customer in February. And then the H200 cluster is just shipped. And these are both going to be operating in Canada in the province of Quebec. And that is our foray to hit our $20 million of annualized revenue on HPC, which is so exciting. And we're currently at 10. So I think that those two big picture items are really what are exciting right now.
Yeah. I just want to correct you on the Bitcoin hodl there. At the moment, your hodl is effectively nearly 69% of your market capitalization, which is it's scary. For every 68.75% on the current value today. So it's $100,400 per Bitcoin. You've got a stack of it there, and that's on the amount that you mined by the end of December. We know you've been mining in January because you don't take days off at HIVE Digital. In terms of, we saw that hash rate grow last year by 47%. Talk through the sort of like where the expectation now is in terms of your current fleet and getting to this 15 exahash. What's the roadmap like between now and then?
Yeah, so we've got a couple things underway. We've done an internal upgrade to get our overall global fleet efficiency down to under 20 joules a terahash. Our interim target is under 19, actually. And how are we doing that is with the upgrade of the Canaan new Avalon A series. And so we announced two purchases, an aggregate total of 11,500 Avalons. And those are going to replace the older 30 joule per terahash machines, which, by the way, have been mining for the past 2+ years. And of course, and I always like to remind all the enthusiasts out there, it is at the tail end of the life cycle of an ASIC where you're printing free cash flow. You're usually ROIing in the first year if you're really good, and maybe some guys don't even ROI at all, but in that first year to year and a half, you're ROIing. Once you've paid off that machine, you want to run it as far as you can to get as much free cash flow. And so in the later innings of an ASIC's life cycle, the parent margin may be thinner, but it's printing free cash flow. And, Anthony, maybe there's some way that you can come up with to start measuring that as a metric in the industry, because I think that's so often looked over. People just look at the quarter over quarter. What is your gross mining margin? I can inflate my gross mining margin by constantly upgrading brand new machines, but they never ROI. So number one, so this is a very tactful upgrade. And we couldn't press release $1 per terahash price that we picked up the cadence for, but it was phenomenal. It was a sub 1 year ROI. And I by the way, I use a 5-cent OPEX just as a good, easy number that any analyst or enthusiast can just do an apples to apples. Take any one and just use that as an approximate figure and say, what is your ROI after you subtract that OPEX? And if you're getting under 1 year, you're hitting a home run. So those Canaans, we had some arrive in November and December, and they've been running for the last couple of months. It's going great. And we actually have a bunch more shipping this week. And the balance, so the entire 11,500 unit order will be completed by March. And that'll actually get us to closer to 6.8 exahash and a sub 20 joule per terahash global fleet efficiency, which is really exciting. It's going to obviously increase our current break even by about 15%, going from 22 to about 19 joules per terahash. And then, of course, Paraguay, all the site and substation we expect actually to be done in May. And containers are going to be shipping in April, but really we just broadcast June. But that'll be brought on in tranches of about easily 30 megawatts a month. And so that's why really by the summer is when we're hitting that first 12.5. And then the balance of that expansion towards the end of summer for the full 15 exahash. And then, Anthony, what that's going to do is that's going to bring our global average operating efficiency down to 17 joules a terahash. So we'll have a phenomenal break even. And by the way, we are able to comment that we got the Bitmain S21 plus hydros for $14 a terahash. Something like a $10-month ROI at 5-cent OPEX when we were doing the math. And of course,
and our peers just paid 15.
And we pay, exactly to Frank's point, we paid 14 when Bitcoin was in the 90,000 range, 90,000 plus range. And our peers paid 15 when Bitcoin was in the 70,000 range. So even though Bitcoin surged, we really value the relationships we have with the ASIC vendors. And, we've known all the key people at these companies for years and years and years. Obviously, Bryce and Anthony, HIVE is the first publicly traded crypto miner. So we have these long-lasting relationships. You see a lot of our peers, executives come and go, but we have one of the longest, I think we have the longest standing C-suite team in crypto mining for publicly traded companies, So it's bolstering those relationships, getting great ROI on our investments, and all the while just scaling with intention. So it's going to be, I would say, an awesome 2025 for HIVE. We're really excited.
In terms of machines, so you've mentioned the Canaan, you've mentioned the Bitmain S21s. A couple of questions. In 2021, when the Bitcoin price rallied, we saw the price of machines increase. Now, we know that some miners in early last year, were able to get probably similar prices to what you just got there after they put in all their discounts that were allowed. I'm not seeing the sort of any level of increase in price that we witnessed that year. I mean, we saw some S19s when Riot and Marathon were buying 30, 40,000, and they were getting for like $30. And then we saw that ramp up all the way up to 80. And in one case, we saw one miner pay $100 a terahash for S19s. Are
Yeah.
you seeing anything now, I know we haven't got the chip issue that we had in 2021, but are you seeing anything in the market that suggests prices are going to start rising? So it's good that you guys and some of the PMIs have already got their orders in place with options, etc.
Yeah, so the ASIC manufacturers are extremely sophisticated. So it's really hash price. We're at $56 a petahash a day right now. So although Bitcoin is cresting in the 100,000 range, difficulty is also at an all-time high of 110 trillion. So when you net that out, you're sort of in the mid $50 hash price range. And even when Bitcoin was getting into the 100 plus thousand range a few weeks ago, hash price was still only at the $60 per petahash. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see the hubris return if hash price gets to the 80 and certainly the $100 range, right? Because in 2021, Anthony, as you know, hash price was in the $300 to $400
Yeah.
per hash rate. Now, there's also a commodification of hash rate effect because, back then, the best miner on the market did 100 terahash. Now you have machines that are generating, like our one S21 Hydro does 319 terahash. So you produce more hash cheaply. So the best way to look at it is I always denominate things in dollar per megawatt hour, right? Because that factors in both the machine efficiency and your hash price. And so right now, like as of today at $56 hash price, if you've got an older 30 joule per terahash machine, you're doing about almost 8 cents a kilowatt hour of revenue. And if you've got a machine that's say 22 joules a terahash, you're doing about 10.5 cents. And if you've got a brand new machine that's 15 joules, you're doing about 15 cents a kilowatt hour, right? So these are still healthy operating margins right now for the industry. And I think that you're going to see solid numbers for the period end December. Everyone's going to be reporting very near term. Actually, HIVE will be, it's actually an interim quarter for us. So it's not our year end. Our year end is March. So you'll see our results before everybody else. So look forward to that. Mid-February is when they'll be posted. But I think that when you look at where hash price can go and these revenues can go, yeah, I think we could definitely hit $80 to $100 hash price on this bull run. And that's when you'll see the ASIC prices go all crazy. And, if I had to bet you lunch, I'd say you'll see people throw money at machines and just scale. So, yeah, it'll probably happen again.
I'm going to approach it from a chief investment officer perspective. You had clever people like Fred go out and do his ATM to go buy up all the inventory machines. And that created a gap. That created a scarcity short term. And even if you put them on the floor and they weren't plugged in, 60,000 machines or whatever, it didn't matter. It created this sort of scramble. We have experienced this with NVIDIA chips, with Elon Musk going out last summer and raising several billions and buying everything, all the H100s. And all of a sudden, gap. And then your Blackwells that you were supposed to be getting, they get delayed, H200s, and then they come back to, why? Well, because Elon Musk bought them all. And so if he is able to raise that capital and go in and tie up the supply, what that does is gives them really 9 months of space to build, or delays they may have. They've got now 9 months grace because there's no other machines unless you're going to pay much higher prices in that secondary market. So you start seeing that take place. I haven't seen it this time. What I think is, as a CIO, I'll give you that perspective looking at it. We have Riot being attacked by one of these hedge funds that are pushing for, they say governance, but really they're trying to take that electricity and make it an HPC. So if we go back to Core Scientific, it basically went from 50 cents to $20. And in came CoreWeave sourcing that energy. And so now we have activist hedge funds coming in and looking at companies like Riot and saying that you should reposition your energy. And I don't think they can really do that because they're on the grid and it's variable energy and they make money giving it back. And you really can't run an HPC facility with that high variability. But I think that we're seeing the mining companies go out and raise all this money to buy Bitcoin. They're not buying machines. They're not betting on that difficulty. And if they do have access to this electricity, you're going to get an activist come in and say, that's not a good return on your capital. You ought to stop Bitcoin mining and turn it all over to HPC. And I heard about 15 exahash in Texas is now going to leave and be repurposed for HPC. Well, where are all those machines going to go? Who's buying them? Right? They've got to come into the market. And so that supply and demand has changed. The senior guys doing these notes, and I find them a bit disturbing, these notes, because they're really not transparent in some of these press releases. And I think that's why I mentioned the other company's name is they go say we raised $750 million to buy Bitcoin. Maybe 60%, 40% went to buy stock in the open market for the shorters.
Yeah.
People realize that. They don't tell you that the people buying those converts are shorting the stock, and so the stock doesn't get too depressed. They have to take a certain portion to buy back the stock. And if they say, oh, it's at 100% premium, bullshit. They had to turn around and take a big portion of that money to buy calls. Yeah. And guess what? The banker makes the money. The banker creates the synthetic on the calls and the puts around that. So out of $100 million, maybe 60 million is buying Bitcoin. Now, yeah. I think Michael Saylor has got a different mechanism that he's not had to go and do that, how he's created his companies. But the other ones, if you start to drill down, and it's like Applied Digital yesterday, that Macquarie's transaction, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant if you're the investor. Why? Because they structured a perpetual preferred, which is like a gold royalty on that megawatt. So for every megawatt of electricity, so you're seeing all this creativity going into the capital markets. Really, you're not going in to buy those machines that are necessary to give you the cash flow. And we're contrary. We haven't done one of these notes. We are buying equipment, engineers, building out sites, and that's very different than every week. There's supposed to be a $2 billion deal done this week, and someone else going to announce one of these type of converts. And what do? They short the stocks, and we have found that they short HIVE as a proxy because there wasn't enough stock out there on company A, B, and C to short against position. So they all move with Bitcoin. So we'll look for other names we could go borrow to short. And we're looking at why does our borrow go at 2% a month all of a sudden? And it's not showing up in the sheets. So they say, what's your short position? It's the easiest way to tell a short position is the cost of the ETFs to borrow from. So if they're 20 basis points or 50 basis points, that's okay for the month. That's the short. But when they start going 200 basis points, that's 24% a year. So that means we're getting banged around with all this noise around us. That's what I feel. It's like noise around. Here we are swimming along, and the waves are getting bigger all around us. And we're just going to plow through. We're going to plow through and build our HPC. We're happy as we're growing 30,000 a day now. And we're happy what we've got our vision for buying machines. You know that? We're going to buy machines. So we don't think there's a huge buyer out there. If you look at the billions of dollars being raised in the past 3 months, how much has gone into buy machines?
Not much. No, it's no. Only, I mean, CleanSpark didn't buy any Bitcoin, but they said they were using it for their expansion plan. So they've still got to buy sites to fit their machines in to get to their hash rate this year. But going back, you mentioned machines then. We'll just stick on that for one more question. You mentioned you have deals with a number of miners. What's the sort of deciding factor to choose, a Bitmain machine versus Canaan
ROI.
versus
It's ROI,
MicroBT.
Anthony.
ROI.
It's all math.
Yep.
It's all math. It's all spreadsheets.
It's not about the machine. It's just really about the maths behind the machine.
You've got three big players now, right? Bitmain, MicroBT, and Canaan. But there's many crypto mining manufacturers that have come and gone, right? And so these are actually the three that stood the test of time. So their technology is quite robust, and they figured a lot of the things out. It's not like, in 2020 when there was all these white label upstarts, and you don't know if you're going to get the machines or if the warranty is going to suck. So at this point in the game, I think there's a good degree of confidence buying from the big three. And so once you've kind of evaluated that, and by the way, like we always get test samples months in advance from all the players, because our tech team evaluates, we drill down, look at the interface, and once we're comfortable, then we get out there and we make these decisions. So it's real world field engineering. Of course, that goes without saying, but I should say it. And then all the data-driven analysis, right? So we always want to make sure that our investments are accretive. And so, because look, when you enter a bear market, ATM liquidity drops, Bitcoin price drops. So you want to make sure that the investments that you've made are actually going to be accretive. So you've got free cash flow, or at the end of the day, you've made money from what you've invested previously. So that's kind of a big thing. But I want to pick up on something that Frank highlighted, which I think has been overlooked with all this hubris, is buying all these cap calls and doing share buybacks. Your net proceeds, Frank estimated, is roughly 2/3 of every dollar. So you raise 100 million, maybe you get 60, 65 million net proceeds. Guess what? You still have to pay the 100 million back at the end of the term. So what's going to happen then? So, okay, Bitcoin goes to the moon. Everything's going to be good for everyone if Bitcoin goes to the moon. Where's the downside protection? That's the big what if. And people just sort of talk past that. So, we've looked very carefully. People have entertained sending us term sheets. The bankers are so tenacious, right, to sell you the latest product that they've engineered, I think is a good word to describe it. But as Frank said, we're gonna plow through, right? We're really excited. We've announced the moving of the office to San Antonio, so it'll be U.S. domiciled, and so I think that will really allow us to get liquidity and exposure in the U.S. indexes, right? And of course, the scale that everybody's always said. When I was in New York in September, I talked to some of the bigger banks as well as the banks that give us research coverage. And often they go, oh, if only you guys were bigger. And you said, well, we're going to grow when it makes sense to. And then boom, we came up with the Paraguay deal. And not just the Paraguay announcement, but again, actual procurement of the ASICs at the right time, the right price. So I think that with all of that stuff, plus what's going on in the world of HPC, see, we have the ability to convert our data centers in New Brunswick and Bowdoin because we own the land, right? And so that puts that, in my opinion, as an institutional grade long-term asset. And we have the pedigree of running the GPU clusters. We've hit our 10 million milestone interim target. So I think 2025 is going to be the year of execution. And I think that it'll be a great one.
I'm going to try to come back to a question you asked earlier. I think trying to recap, what was last year, there's some important parts was we got much more research coverage. Aydin's done a phenomenal job in working with analysts, and so that sponsorship is much broader, which is a testament to doing a good job. Gap doing unaudited, but gap reconciliation, because we saw the way things are compared to the U.S. companies. It gave us a competitive disadvantage. But really, to get into to qualify for these indexes, being NASDAQ listed is not the only way. You have to move your jurisdiction here. And so we've done that. I think that's really important. I think the AI is that we've repurposed our existing machines, which we made money from, get our money back on Ethereum, and now AI, and now we're buying more machines. We're understanding where the size and these platforms we went on. We don't have what your typical, if you're going to go in the AI business, you have to hire a technician that's going to support the salesperson, and then you need a technical technician inside the data center that's really making sure that I'm customizing for what you need. And so you have a much bigger infrastructure around that data center than you do for Bitcoin mining. So when our stepping stone was to go on platforms, we don't have that difference. We're really basically repurposing people inside, learning a new, and so that helps us get that additional cash flow. But the next leg will be to go to your typical data center where you get a contract for 2 years. We've got some that we're talking about 2 months and 3 months, Aydin.
Yeah. So we've got what we call bare metal contracts where you provision the GPU cluster and they'll get rented for a few months at a time. We've got some of those contracts in place, but the next leg up to hit our 20 million of annualized revenue target is we're in discussions to rent our entire 32 node cluster of H100s, which has InfiniBand, by the way, to one client for 1 year. And then we have our 64 node cluster of H200s, which just shipped. And again, that will be operational in Quebec, and rent that entire cluster to one customer, because then we can get on to ordering and installing our next cluster. And of course, Blackwell is sort of the next generation technology, and we've been looking a lot into that. But the other thing is being able to deliver and perform with HPC revenue is so key, because as Frank has talked about, it's more elaborate. The system operations and development operations surrounding an HPC operation of GPU cluster, but also it's satisfying that uptime. And, no names, but other presumptive entrants to the marketplace, I think, had a bit of a wake-up call when they're saying, 99.9% uptime. It's like, Anthony, you know this better than anybody because you track Bitcoin per exahash, which is your effective metric of uptime in the sector. As you know, HIVE has always led. I think we're one of your legacy all-time top performers in that metric. And over the last year or two, I mean, gosh, Anthony, like you had big cap crypto miners that had uptime in the 60 to 70%. It was like a waterfall. You had the best guys like 98, 99%, and then it kind of fall to 95, 90, 85, and you'd have guys in 60, 70%. I think some of that was around how they were reporting, or maybe they had all these machines installed and they really struggled with uptime. Well, guess what, right? You have to have the discipline. If you've got an SLA with an enterprise client and these GPUs are supposed to be running all the time, and they're doing a training run, or they need a seamless experience for their users doing inference work, what have you, or even if it's traditional HPC, you can't just be like, oops, sorry, our GPUs crashed for half a day, we'll get back to you. That doesn't cut it, right? So I think it's very important for the investors to understand there's a cadence and a discipline to the execution. And so it's not as straightforward as like, oh, okay, well, we're just going to scale our crypto mining operation. We're going to plug in more machines, grow our megawatt, grow our exahash, and everything will fall into place. There's the customer and again, the SLA uptime that's so important. So as Frank said, we've taken a very methodical approach where, again, we grew from 1 to 10 million of annualized revenue with our GPU fleet. And we did that with the NVIDIA A-series cards. Then we bought H100s, and we expanded our H100s, and then we bought H200s. So it's about having that cadence and that discipline, responsible with our capital allocation and deployment, make sure we're seeing an ROI. It doesn't make business sense. Great. Okay. We're pedal to the metal, right? So I think we've had a very formative and disciplined, the operative word is disciplined approach to our AI growth.
That's awesome. I want to come back to the HPC AI in a second, and we've got a few on Sweden as well. But before we do, you mentioned Paraguay, and before we started recording, Frank, you had talked about some really cool ESG components down there. So my question to you is, have you found anything unexpected during your construction in Paraguay? And can you talk to us a little bit about the community partnerships down there?
I think there's two things was great for Aydin and I to go down and to visit. In particular, the technical aspects. It's amazing to see between Brazil and Paraguay. It's just unbelievable, and to realize what they've done. So we went through a technical report from where the electricity comes from, right down to existing facilities. We went to see where the Chinese have 100 megawatts and what they're doing, and it looked like you're going into a fort, a prison, barbed wire, and everything was totally different than other people that were there. And so I think the big part was the takeaway. I didn't give you more of the technical, was the humidity. And how do you manage? Heat is one thing, but if it's really hot and it's humid, what are the best machines? What is the water? So that was part of the learning curve that we were on. And Aydin and Luke, they went out to visit other assets. And Aydin, you can give you more granular details on that. And go ahead, Aydin. I'll come back on the.
I think the best way to describe it is the landscape in Paraguay is actually quite well defined. And I would say that the best operators in Paraguay that run Bitcoin mining facilities have really embraced the community. And that ethos resonates with how HIVE has always done business. And Anthony, I think you saw that when we did a day trip to Bowdoin last year, and you saw the HIVE arena, and you saw the kids, like, we didn't plan that. The kids getting out of practice wearing the HIVE jerseys as we got there. We went to the Bowdoin Business Agency, right? So, we're very much connected into the community. And Frank and I, as well as Luke and some of our key contractors out there, we went in to see the governor of the region. And we wanted to find out what mattered to them. And you know what it was? It was getting electricity to schools. Well, that's right up our alley. So we were happy to support them with that build out and build that relationship. Now, on the flip side, when we went to see this, there was a large, Chinese operator out there, about 100 megawatts. We were grateful for the access, but when you walk onto the site, it almost has this very clandestine sort of setup and feel, and the other operations, you saw employees that were happy to be there and had their uniforms and it was just almost very picturesque and so organized how the facilities were laid out. So it gave us a lot of confidence in some of the great facilities that we've seen in the region. And of course, we visited our own and we saw the progress there. So I personally, and I think Frank would agree, I'm quite bullish on Paraguay. And of course, Frank had met with the country president, and it's about building those relationships. It's not just about coming in and doing an infrastructure project. And again, the Itaipu Dam is the world's largest hydro dam. We were told it's bigger than the Three Gorges. So this dam, power goes to Brazil, Paraguay, and Argentina. And they actually had a portion where it's on the border of Brazil and Paraguay. So I got a photo. I should send it to you guys. I should tweet it. Yeah, 1 foot in Paraguay and 1 foot in Brazil, and they got a border. It was looking like something on Austin Powers, or James Bond, not Austin Powers. It's the real deal. It's not the the wacky knockoff. And so it's a short drive from where we are. So again, you see the same thing, Anthony. What did we do? We went to see the hydro dam, didn't we, in Bowdoin, right? Which was a short drive from our facility. Guess what? In New Brunswick, we're in the town of Grand Falls, like waterfalls. Again, you see the hydro dam out there. So, we're thrilled to be out there. We're thrilled to invest in the community and bring power to the schools. We love the local contractors and professionals that we work with. We're big on building those relationships. And so I think 2025 is going to be a great year for forays into Latin America.
We were in almost like at Congress in the Senate room, and while Congress is in session, and the head of the Republican Party and the head of the Democratic Party came in to meet with Aydin and I. And that was, really quite significant, that so that we get a flavor for the two parties and what they think. Both of them were very strong on pro-Bitcoin, more than the president, which was really, eye-opening to us. He still is tarnished with working for the IMF, big bank, central bank type of mindset. But but he's an impressive leader and what he does. But you can see the difference between these other parties. So then we took a chopper and we went out to see and visit the what they call it, the governor of the state of Texas, like Abbott. No, we went to see the governor of where we're building our facility. And that was so informative. And it really, blue eyes guy was just, it was amazing to see how articulate what his vision is. But then he tells you the difficulties, which I mentioned earlier, my experience in the gold mining funding in Latin America, is money goes into the central government and how it gets allocated for education. Well, money will go for the teachers and money will go for the building, but what about the electricity to hook up the air conditioning? Well, that was done. So the wires come in, and what is the difficulty? And it's 40 degrees Celsius. I mean, we're talking about 90 to 100 degrees, and the humidity is pushing that. So he was explaining all the air conditioning, but no power. So we said, give us the 10 schools in the region, and told our contractor, start going and wiring those schools up. And that's part of what we think is important in that community. Education, personally, I give a lot of money every year for education locally and in Canada, for scholarships, etc. So it's dear to my heart, and we're doing it in that community. In Bowden, we do it with kids learning how to play hockey. We have 12 teams we fund for that. And we also fund for gamers, for people, young kids, and like basically halfway between high school and going to college, where they do a coding and gaming, which you got to visit, Anthony, at Bowden Tech Center. And so we fund that. And so we're thrilled about being part of the Paraguayan community.
And for people that don't know, Candy Crush came from Sweden, the actual, and it's probably one of the biggest app games been played. I mean, I can remember playing it. I don't play it at the moment, but I played it years and years when it came out because it was very addictive. But yeah, it was very interesting that technical region they have there. While we're in Sweden, you mentioned recently about this great power deal that you've managed to achieve. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and the impact that will have on decisions going forward in terms of what you can do in Sweden with regards to, are you going to continue Bitcoin mining there, or are you going to focus on the HPC AI business because of the uncertainty with regards to power? Because when I was visited there last year, the price was getting closer to sort of like, the margins were being a bit shorter in Sweden, but it looks like you've got a really good deal.
Yeah, we've been listening to this story so long about building a green steel facility, and it was to create jobs in the north. And they're actually bringing people in from Finland and Serbia and Croatia to work. So they're not coming from southern Sweden. So this whole idea of creating employment is not really working out what they have. And there's a series of delays that they're having themselves in that whole construction. So it's like a boogeyman over here that you just have to be aware that it's coming along. But for our energy, we're safe. If we want to expand, that's the difficulty. So the only where you can get the big bang for your buck is in the HPC on that expanding. the facility we have for the 30 megawatts, that will stay and is profitable. But really, the gem will be, and my experience now, I just launched my new ETF. It's called WAR. And it's taken me 18 months of regressional studies on it, and what are the best holdings to have and what industries. So if you look at the need for recalibrating for the what I like to call the Red Cold War, America is going to spend so much and right today rebuilding all their military with NVIDIA chips and AI. And to do that, they need the data centers. And as you know, in Bowdoin, we're right beside a military camp.
Yeah.
Saab is pushing their whole military, what they're spending on. We think under President Trump, the push of accountability in NATO countries that have not been keeping up the 2% quota will have to go to that. And the same thing is with Canada. So he's already told Canada they can become the 51st state. We'll have to take over Greenland. All that stuff is just to wake people up to what is really going on. And creating this other product has really helped me appreciate HIVE, is appreciate the significance. So what I'm trying to share with the listeners is that 12% weighting in this product over 10 years and rebalancing the data centers, the revenue and cash flow, who's got the strongest every quarter. And that means I've done 40 quarters of data. That means I have 600 months of data. That portfolio with AI and NVIDIA, so you need semiconductors, you need data centers, cybersecurity needs data centers. You start putting it all together, it's grown at a 25% CAGR. It just shocked me. But it really helped me appreciate our data centers at another level and the NVIDIA, because the big spend is going to be the retooling. There's a thing called the Salt Typhoon, where the Chinese basically hacked into all the telecom in Canada and particularly the US. That's the serious part. And so this Cold War, Red Cold War, is not going away. And the value of these chips that we have and the value of the data centers is only going to go up.
That's amazing.
In terms of 2025 and this big growth strategy, what funding requirements do you still need, or have you got sufficient funding on hand now to meet that strategy?
Well, the faster we get our engineering complete to start the construction for the 20 megawatts in New Brunswick and the 7 megawatts, I think, Aydin, correct me, in Bowdoin, right, the faster we'll get the revenue from it. And Aydin, we just was it the last purchase we made of NVIDIA chips?
30 million, yeah. So we did the H200 and H100 order. The H100 order is roughly a third of that, and the H200 order was 2/3 of that 30 million. So we've got two revenue streams. One is revenue from the sale of our GPU compute, and the other, when we undertake the conversion of our 7 megawatt site, which you saw, Anthony, in Bowdoin, or building 4 in New Brunswick, then you have the optionality to provide co-location, right, as that would be our data center. And that's sort of the model that Core Scientific has undertaken. And CoreWeave, they operate the GPU clusters. And so really, I think Microsoft wanted access to the power that CoreWeave had, that Core Scientific had, and CoreWeave was its proxy. And so that's how that deal all came together. And so by having that same optionality where we have the tier 3 infrastructure that we'll be able to provide and host other GPU clusters, and that's a more stable data center business type of multiple, but the ROIs on your GPU cluster is something like 2 years, right? And so that is very attractive as well. So having the duality is there. And because we've got all the low voltage distribution and of course the high voltage in place in New Brunswick and Sweden, we're looking at a 12-month construction period, really, for a re to get it from, because you've been to the facility in Bowdoin. It's not like a crypto mining style. Like Little Bowdoin was built as a GPU facility. One of the halls is effectively when you walk in it, it feels just like it's a tier 3. And so you have all of that extra level of finish in place. And so they would say you build a new tier 3 data center, you're going to be 10 to 12 million a megawatt. And so with the existing facilities, we come in substantially less than that, and we come in substantially quicker than that. So we'll provide more details on that as those projects roll out. But I think the bigger news is that we've got collectively, right, it's 248 H100s, 504 H200s. So, that's about 750 GPUs that are coming online with InfiniBand in Quebec. So we're really excited about that. And, the other topic is data sovereignty. Like when we were at Supercompute in Atlanta, we met researchers out of the province of Quebec, which had a huge presence there. As you likely know, the guy that won the Nobel Prize, there's 3 research institutes in Canada, and we've been introduced to them. So we want to sort of foster those initiatives with compute in the R&D sector as well, while we also shore up our commercial initiatives, right? Because in the same way that we invest in the community in HIVE, we sponsor a lot of compute with R&D initiatives. There was NeurIPS in Vancouver, Neural Information Processing Systems. It was 20,000 people at the Vancouver Convention Center in December. It was basically an AI conference, right? Neural networks. And so, we met a researcher at NYU Stern, and he had a few students that were presenting there. And so, we provided some compute to his, and these guys are doing like cutting edge neural network stuff, and very, very sophisticated. And so it's like, a VC that invests in a bunch of startups and one of them turns into a unicorn, and it just makes everything worth it, right? So we very much like to provide compute to really bright researchers. So that's the other part of the business that I think is really exciting, that we don't often get a chance to talk about. I know you've got a very keen audience, so I'm happy to share that color. So yeah, that's kind of the big piece on the AI right now.
When we do 20 million in revenue on AI business, it's a very high margin compared to Bitcoin mining. It's a big difference. And so when we do 20 million, now we're at 30 million. So 30 million is going to give you almost 12 million a year. And our goal is 20 million. So our goal is to get to 60,000 a day. And if we had 100% utilization of our machines every day, we'd be almost there with the machines we have. And so we just are plodding along until we get our own data center, like we have like the vision for New Brunswick. But we feel, I think I is very comfortable with getting to $60,000 a day revenue, and that's going to probably throw off EBITDA, well, probably 40,000 a day. Wouldn't you think so, Aydin?
Yeah. And that's our target for H1 of this year. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, it's incredible hearing the opportunity here, specifically on the HPC AI front, and hearing how you're giving back to these communities, the researchers, the schools, the ice hockey teams, all the rest. So you guys, I know we're at the end of the hour here. We appreciate the context, the color, and detail. I wanted to kick it back if there's any closing thoughts, but thank you once again for the time.
Well, thank you. Well, we hit 6, we're going to 15, and maybe higher for 2025. Stay tuned to this station.
Sounds like a plan, and a great plug for the station. Guys, feel free to subscribe, hit the like button. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
And check out our Twitter. There's great content on our Twitter feed.
Awesome.
HIVE Digital Tech. Yeah.
Will do. I'll leave that linked below as well. Have a great day, you guys.